Hudson Soft, Maxis, and SimEarth. As occurred between most contracts, I was on the search for my next game deal. I finally reached a receptive publisher, Maxis Software. Although Electronic Arts would eventually buy Maxis, they were independent in that era. Their claim to fame was SimCity, and thereafter SimEarth, and then The Sims. There were many versions of these games on most platforms, at the time and of course still. On computers and video game consoles, even handheld devices. Honestly, they seem to be on everything. I interviewed with Maxis in hopes of securing a contract. I interviewed across the entire company. Engineers, producers, designers, executives. I even interviewed with the creator, founder, and innovator of Maxis's flagship products, Will Wright. I impressed them one and all. They offered me 2 contracts. One to license a video game level and art and sprite authoring tool that I had developed over the years to help me make games. The second was to translate and port SimEarth from the PC personal computer and/or Macintosh computer versions so that it would run on the dedicated home console unit from Hudson Soft called the TurboGrafx, and on the TurboGrafx CD, an early compact disc video game console. It was an opportunity to work on the TurboGrafx. That in itself was exciting. It was new. And especially to work on a platform that was innovating with compact disc-based video games. Only the Sega CD existed as an alternative with compact discs in the gaming world. And it was a Genesis with just a CD tacked onto it. The TurboGrafx Duo CD, it supported 256 colors, albeit in 16 color 8x8 little tiny pixel tile blocks, kind of like custom character images. It also supported, though, 8x16 pixel objects called motion objects or mobs. Some people call them sprites. To make SimEarth work on the TurboGrafx, I became a human compiler linker, as I would read the original C++ code from the PC and Mac versions and translate it in my head to 6502 machine assembly language code, with RAM and segments banked in and out of memory due to its limited address range as compared to those computers. And I had to convert floating point and double floating point math that is native to those other computers into 8-bit integer register-based operations on a microprocessor that had no idea how to do it natively. It only knew how to add and subtract. It did not even know how to divide or multiply. And even more techy, I created an interrupt time slice system to support gamepad, mouse, and concurrent thread-based Earth simulations so I could emulate a multi-threaded computer on a platform that did not support any such thing. It was insanely complicated, but I adapted my authoring tool to support it, and I delivered the impossible. I delivered SimEarth that ran at frame rate, 30 frames a second, in 256 colors using a mouse-like interface with a gamepad on the TurboGrafx Duo CD. Something about Will Wright. During an early game developers conference, I recall Will Wright of Maxis present his philosophy of taking risks in game development. Will Wright's claim to fame was that he designed and programmed the original PC and Macintosh SimCity and SimEarth games, and of course later The Sims. The one thing that he said that stuck with me was that it is paramount to learn from other people's mistakes and successes and model your approach to maximize their good ideas and avoid their bad ideas. He described it like a minefield. He asked, do you want to be the first or last person to traverse the minefield? The first people will likely fail, blow up, and die, whereas the last people will be too late and will not attain any reward or achievement because everyone else got there first and claimed the benefits of success. So he said the answer may be between. Let some people take the big risks before you decide to replicate their success and go further. He said you want to border plagiarism, but do not be plagiaristic. That is how you succeed, he asserted. Ultimately, it is important to get into mostly blue oceans of innovation and new ideas after someone has crossed the minefield, but others have failed. It is paramount to enter a slightly red ocean with competitive blood. Well, early on in my SimEarth contract, Hudson Soft, who made the TurboGrafx gaming console and apparently was funding Maxis to fund me to make the game for their platform, they wanted to meet me in person. It was a Japanese tradition to meet business partners. I learned simple conversational Japanese phrases from a cassette series called Rapanese. It was a cute way to learn key phrases to get around as a tourist and professional in Japan. The Hudson Soft executives smiled with my poor pronunciation, but they were pleased that I tried to at least communicate in their native language. They shifted, however, to English as they spoke much better English and were far more fluent than I was in Japanese. The trains and transit system in Japan were super organized and planned. Everything made navigation actually intuitive and made sense once you learned the design principles behind their layout and operating routes. Japan hosts many people from all around the world, and its language is not the most ubiquitous language globally, and so city planners added Japanese anime characters in front of subway entrances and train and bus lines so that people could navigate by character picture, not just names written out in a native phonetic Japanese katakana or some such language. It made it possible for me to get around without a translator. Of course, simple transactions and asking for directions was actually impossible for me. I needed those anime pictures, it turned out. My reputation was wide within the small video game industry then. I was invited to visit Hudson Soft in Tokyo, Japan, and their video game university in Sapporo, Japan. They wanted me to meet the executives of Hudson Soft since face-to-face, in-person relationships were extremely important to them. Again, that was consistent with the Japanese professional culture of the era. Visiting the executive team in Tokyo was fine, if not boring. They directed my guide and translator, who was also a video game engineer, to take me out to Japan's karaoke bars and other places. I was not interested in going out to a bar, much less one where they might ask me to sing. But out of respect, I agreed to go out to karaoke with my Japanese colleagues. The experience went, well, albeit slow, with a translator. I felt important and special, though, being an international guest speaker in Japan about video game development. Let's get back to karaoke. Karaoke was the same as it was in the United States. Tables were arranged to face a microphoned stage with big displays showing the words to be sung, as a small ball dances across the words to indicate what word and what syllable should be sung at what time. Trying to avoid exposure or being asked to sing, I kept conversations going. Unfortunately, though, I spoke English, and so there were delays, often, for translation and then relay. Those delays gave time for attending executives to think and imagine what I might sound like singing. And so ask they did. They asked me to sing. As I stood up, the group seated at a nearby table clapped, and they exclaimed some random name that I did not recognize, and then declared sumo. I thought I recognized the word sumo as a Japanese wrestler. The translator leaned over to me and he explained that, well, they were cheering the great American sumo that was going to grace everyone with his singing. They thought that I was some American sumo that apparently lived in Hawaii and was visiting for a local sumo tournament that apparently was happening then in Tokyo while I was visiting. So a white American looked like every other white American to them. I could have seen that as racist or something, but I did not. I have been a victim of real racism, but I have never been racist myself. It has always been and remains offensive to me. I am sure they did not mean disrespect to me. In fact, they were praising me as the great white sumo. Well, they called out, "It's a white Christmas! It's a white Christmas!" Yes, in English, they wanted me to sing, "It's a White Christmas." And without my even confirming it, onto the karaoke display, someone set it up for me. So I was asked to go up and sing. I did. I sang poorly. I do not have a singing voice, much less I think a good voice. But I sang, and I finished. And they all cheered and clapped, at least for my effort. On my flight to Sapporo after my Tokyo visit to another Hudson Soft location, which is an island north of the mainland Japan, from Tokyo, there was a flight. It was a short flight, and they had an in-flight movie. It was in recognition and memory of the Hiroshima nuclear bombing. That's right. The movie on the air flight between Tokyo and Sapporo was celebrating the United States nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I think I was the only American on the flight. It made things particularly uncomfortable. I learned later from a Hudson Soft executive that his sister was incinerated in one of the bombs, and that he swears that he recognizes her singed shadow on a wall where she might have been near at the bombing. He told me that the shades of death and films are to ensure that Japan never rises to the level of pride that they had before. They were shown their hubris by being so destroyed so utterly by nuclear weapons. During my tour time, an old man approached me and echoed that same view. He asked me with no prompting for forgiveness for he and his family's transgressions. I had no idea how to respond. I was not there at the time. I had nothing to do with Hiroshima or Nagasaki. And yet, being an American, all things USA were attributed to me, even nuclear bombings of Japan long past. Hudson Soft executives believed strongly in traditions and hosting dinner every night for their guest. It was critical. During a dinner in Sapporo, one of the executives said he noticed that I had been talking to one of the admins, and he informed me that she would go to the hotel with me tonight to tend to my needs. Whoa. He was offering his admin as a prostitute to me. Or at least that's what it sounded like. I queried the translator to make sure that what I perceived was correct. He confirmed in Japanese, yes, it was correct. He told me that it is traditional in many companies for admins to double in the reception and professional visitor accommodation roles. Yeah, professional visitor accommodation, I guess meant prostitution. To this day, I struggle to believe that that was the way it was and true. But I was offered sex from a company admin without provocation or any expressed interest. Cultures can be wildly different. The food choices were exotic. My name may be Seaborn, but I do not like seafood. I am not allergic, but it just tastes awful to me. The dishes looked like sea scorpions and sea slugs and starfish and all sorts of sushi mysteries wrapped in rice. It was all so very unappetizing to me that I did not eat much at all. I could not eat it. I did not want to offend my hosts, but there was no way that I was going to eat the stuff that they laid out before me as treats. During my visit to Hudson Soft, it was near Christmas. Christmas was upon Sapporo, with Kirin beer facilities nestled in the nearby hills. Snow was falling and it was cold. While we were in the offices, a man outside Hudson Soft's building was cleaning the windows in the frigid cold while snow fell. The translator with us explained the work ethic in Japan is absolute. They will clean the windows no matter what the weather is. Outside, Sapporo was beautiful, and they had an ice sculpture event going on. Some sculptures were tall as trees and others were small as bunnies. They were everywhere, like a literal winter wonderland of crystalline ice, wilderness, and statues. It was a rare beauty, and I deeply appreciated it. While working on the TurboGrafx Duo CD SimEarth for Maxis in California and Hudson Soft, and visiting Sapporo, I had the opportunity to go to Hudson Soft University to teach. I was both a developer to meet with classes and had tales of game design and getting published. It was cool being a guest speaker at Hudson Soft University, a university that Hudson Soft founded to just teach game development. And the time came again to find another contract, and search, call after call. All that was becoming all too familiar, and I had to learn to be flexible and be persistent and never give up. Rejection was expected. It only took one yes to keep on trucking and making games. Finally, I met someone that would give me a contract. He had a publishing deal with Fox Interactive, a subsidiary of Fox, created just to publish video games. At that time, almost every big entertainment or telecom company had a video game division. It was the furthest downstream from a publisher I had ever been. I was so removed that I never had any influence in the design or concepts beyond my local implementation of Equilibrium, the name of the company's, ideas. Equilibrium had a designing producer that was supposed to tell me what to create, and what the artist came up with is what I should render. It was unpleasantly prescriptive and something that I had never experienced, honestly, since I worked at Burger King. Although it was unpleasant, I was paid well for the highly compressed 3-month contract. Yeah, 3 months. It turned out the owner of Equilibrium, Sean Barger, its president, well, he had a contract for over a year, but he failed entirely to do any work for it, and yet he took the money for it. And so he was basically starting over within the remaining 3 months of the contract. So I finished a year-long contract in 3 months. And I was paid a lot considering it was, such a compressed schedule. It was a great deal for me, honestly. It was a lot of work, and everyone won in the situation. So I have to say, it was worth it. Games, doctors, and world value. That was the topic of a debate that I had once with my ex-wife's disapproving father. Dr. Keller was a conceited man that believed in white supremacy. He would spout his beliefs whenever and wherever he thought there might be a receptive audience. He was proud to show me how he taught my firstborn daughter, Amanda, to goose step after she could barely walk. He was proud of his success in life. He was a farm boy from an immigrant family in Washington state. His parents owned the land that would ultimately be purchased by Microsoft for a lot of money to build campuses on. It changed Dr. Keller from successful to insanely, immensely wealthy. To Dr. Keller's credit, he had joined the army to become a medic so he could get the tuition paid for to attend university and eventually become a doctor. He worked hard for many years. His pride was great, however. We debated over the merits of individual life-saving healthcare versus mass culture-changing art. I argued a game or a book or a movie that inspires people to be and do better, saves more lives, and makes people happier as a civilization than the actual saving of even 1,000 lives by a doctor. I agreed that every life was precious and far more valuable than a game. But I argued ideas are more powerful and more important than an entire generation of people. As to personal gain, I said, you could sell 1,000 medical procedures or 1 million games. Which one touches more people? And which one makes more money? He accepted my arguments were reasonable and fair, though he did insist doctors are important and game developers are not. We never got over that impasse, but I think Dr. Keller developed a tolerable respect for me that day.